Being recorded.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. Um, I hope, like I said earlier, you're all somewhere cool. You're managed to stay cool today. We are in for a couple of warm days, so thanks for spending part of your morning with us. I'm Mayor Schulman with the Foundation's Nonprofit Support Program, and I want to welcome you all to our workshop, A Starter Guide to AI. I want to start by thanking my wonderful colleague, Monica, for all of her expert assistance in helping to plan and manage logistics behind the scenes for today's session. So for those of you who are maybe joining for the first time, Monica and I are part of the Nonprofit Support Program, which is the Foundation's organizational capacity building arm. So we help to strengthen nonprofit organizations and leaders as part of our mission. And if there are ways in which the Nonprofit Support Program can help with your organizational capacity building needs, please do reach out to us. As a reminder, this session is designed to be interactive and participatory, so we encourage you to keep your cameras on to the extent possible and to engage, ask your questions, and there will be a few participatory exercises during today's session. Some of these exercises will use a platform called Slido, slido.com. So if you could just take a minute and open up a tab on your computer in your browser with slido.com, then you'll be ready to go when the exercises begin. And Monica is putting that link in the chat for you as well. I'm sure many of you will have questions as we go through the session today, so please feel free. Enter your questions in the chat at any time during the session, and our presenter will also be pausing after the modules to take your questions, and she will also be staying on immediately following the session in case there are any lingering questions that we're not able to get to during the session. As usual, we will be sharing the PowerPoint slides and the session recording with all of you following the session. And as usual, we will be posting a short survey in the chat towards the end, and we will be sending you the survey in the email following the session. As we like to say, the survey is the only price of admission, and we really do value your feedback and take your comments to heart. So please do take a few minutes and complete the survey. And now I'm delighted to introduce our facilitator for today, Jasmine Daly. Jasmine is the founder of Daily Analytics, which is an embedded data and AI partner for mission-driven organizations. Jasmine delivers technology strategy, implementation, and training that helps nonprofits to use their data and their AI tools confidently, thoughtfully, and ethically. And Jasmine helps build custom dashboards, predictive models, and internal capability along with the organizations that she works with. Jasmine is a frequent conference speaker on AI-assisted software development, and she serves on local nonprofit boards. And in her, I'm sure, copious spare time, she's an avid birder, gardener, and bike rider. So with that, I will pass it on to you, Jasmine.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mayor, for the lovely intro. Um, Everybody can see my screen, right? Beautiful. Thumbs up, head nods. Awesome. Yes, very much encouraged. Uh, Screens, cameras on, mics up. I want this to be as engaging as possible, and I love to chat. So thank you, thank you. Get started. All right. Mayor mentioned this before, but if you haven't already and you're just entering, please feel free in the Zoom chat. Please share your role, focus of your nonprofit, sharing as we all get to know each other if we haven't known each other already. Would love to see keep that conversation going in the chat. A bit of welcome and agenda. So do a little intro on top of Mayor's myself. Um, uh, we'll start at the beginning, the foundation of AI and Gen AI. And then we'll move to a bit of a section on productivity and workplace AI, and we'll go through some specific frameworks of thinking about how to say it really integral into the workflow as you mix generative AI into the work that you're doing. We'll go over some and highlight some really cool purpose-built tools that are built for really specific use cases, but have a really important role in the sector. And then we'll go into what I hope will be a really good discussion of the ethical and responsible implications of using AI and the different various forms and the tools. And we'll talk about its relationship with mission-driven work and the environmental impact as well. And then hopefully we'll have time at the end. If we don't, happy to stay on extra. Also, there's my email in the slide deck. Please feel free to email me. I am a big nerd. I will go on a complete tangent. So feel free. We can have this conversation now, later, next week, a month. Please feel free. Open door, open email. All right. And then, yes, a little note about Slido as well. So when the Slido sections come up, we'll see the slide deck sort of morph into what we've got on the left-hand side, and you'll enter this code. And then if you already have Slido up, you'll enter it on here. This code will be the same throughout the duration of the workshop. And actually, as I progress through the slide deck, the polls and the questions will change automatically. So you don't have to do anything besides just go to Slido, enter this code once, and just kind of follow the directions on there as we go through. If there's any questions, chat help will help you out in whatever various ways. Well, and then if you're on the Zoom desktop app, I recommend SS desktop app, and then Slido in the browser. It's helpful. Okay. All right, a little about me formally. So, hi, I'm Jasmine. Right, I'm a embedded data and AI partner for mission-driven organizations. I really, really love this work. I have a background in biomedical engineering and data science, and I've been working on professional software teams for over a decade now. I live in Glastonbury, Connecticut, and I love it here. And I'm really, really grateful for the ways in which I get to work with my nonprofit clients, and that often includes running and developing training and workshops like the one we're all in right now. I get the opportunity to develop AI governance plans and doing enablement and training, capacity building. I work very closely with leaders and staff as their external partner, getting to know them, their processes, their systems, their tools, and how to support them with the necessary guardrails to implement AI policies and playbooks as they seek to integrate all of this into their work. And then on top of that, I mentioned the nerd bit as well. So I build custom data and AI tools and workflows. I've been doing open source software development for a long, long, long time. I love it. It brings me a lot of joy to contribute back to the community that has given me so much. And so I really enjoy writing software. And so that's a bit about me. If you also have any, tips and tricks on gardening or fixing up old houses, I welcome those as well in the Q&A and later questions. But and then there's my email, Jasmine at Daily Analytics. Very happy to chat further. All right. All right, so we have our first Slido poll. So as folks are navigating over to their browser, they can enter the code 6031672. And I really am curious from this group to let us all know how you feel about AI in a single word. If you have to use more than one, totally fine. There is no rules. But I really just want to get a sense because all of this is very technical as a concept, but this is all very personal. All very aligned with our professional development and our joy. And I feel very strongly about getting to know how you feel about all of this as well. We've got a number of folks entering. I see skeptical, excited. I love those like juxtaposition of words coming in through angry, ambitious, possibilities, nervous, excited, mixed, makes me smarter. I love it. I love it. Fascinated, intrigued, very curious. Oh, this is fantastic. Very, very cool. All right. All right. So this is often when I'm doing trainings like these, this is usually the distribution of feelings. And it's interesting to see that, it's coming fruition continuously as we all are inescapably not able to avoid AI in our work and our personal lives. But it is definitely like an exciting time, but it's definitely a time to be really skeptical given the type of work and sector that we're all in. And it's just been a really interesting time full of possibilities, but there's some trepidation, there's some hesitancy, and living in a matrix. We're gonna get to that in a couple slides too, but I totally resonate with so many of these, and thank you all for sharing. All right, so we'll go to the next slide as well. All right, so I also, on top of those deeply kind of personal feelings, whether it relates to you personally or your work self. A thing that I hear a lot with nonprofit leaders is like at this time, it's June 2026. I hear a lot of folks still keep saying that we feel behind, that they've missed the boat or they've missed the train. And I'm here to tell you, and in fact, because you are all here today, that you have not. The AI train has not left the station. There are plenty of folks on different parts of their journey, and the technology is still rapidly evolving. For reference, made a draft of this last month, had to do tweaks. Just every concept has been changing, and it's been really interesting to be a part of it, but it's changing fast, and there's still a wonderful opportunity to hop on that train. But you can't linger at the coffee shop. And hopefully, this session today gets you one step closer to, putting your bag on top, getting ready, getting your ticket. So you are right where you need to be, and I'm so happy that you're all here today. All right, so we'll kick it off a bit of foundational topics to hopefully sort of demystify aspects of Gen AI. So I also want to say you will hear me say Gen AI and AI interchangeably throughout this workshop. Many people in the industry say it as such, but very specifically, what we're all talking about right now is generative AI. And what that is a type of artificial intelligence that can create new content, text, images, videos, audio, code, whole applications based on patterns it's learned from large amounts of data trained on the internet. It does not receive any pre-written answers. It might seem like it knows. It does not. It knows only what you tell it. And it generates responses in almost near real time, which is really helpful for iteration and experimentation. But that, in a sense, if you want to think about it another way, it's a massive pattern prediction engine wrapped in a conversational interface, mostly what we see in terms of chatting. You type something in, it converts it to the words, into numbers or vectors, math. I always thought I could not be around math after going through it in school, but there's no escaping math. And it runs all of these through a complex formula. And then it's just predicting what the next word, the highest probability it would be. So at the end of the day, it is a lot of very complex math and not magic. So a little bit on what Gen AI is not. It is not a human replacement. It's an assistant, it's a tool. It is not a substitute for human intuition and empathy. I feel this very strongly when I hear lots of large companies trying to replace their staff with AI bots in various capacities. I personally and ethically, I think that is morally wrong, and it is not, I think, as it's ever going to be a human replacement in that way. Gen AI is not a fact source, right? We just talked about it, predicts patterns. It cannot guarantee facts and accuracy or truth. Gen AI is not quite like a search engine. I think a lot of people tend to start using it like it, replacing it as Google, but it doesn't work on that same mechanism as a search engine. Gen AI does not know or understand. It processes probabilities. It has a friendly tone often. It tells you, oh, you're so right. Oh, that's a great idea. That is just the complex prediction engine behind it. Um, and then it's not a context expert. There's a lot of nuance that can be lost as you're trying to interact with these systems, and it requires you to provide a lot of additional context about who you are, what you want, what your organization is focused on, what that particular task is focused on. And then it's just not a set it and forget it. It requires continuous human oversight and iterative refinement over and over again. So there's also just like a lot of buzzwords that do not help all of us coming to this space. Just a lot of jargon. And so want to go through a couple of different terms that'll help sort of level the playing field and hopefully illuminate a little bit of the why behind a lot of this. And so when I say Gen AI or AI, it's generative artificial intelligence, right? LLM stands for large language models. That's the actual engine behind the text. And that is what's trained on billions, probably trillions of pages of human language and artifacts to understand how we communicate. GPT stands for generative pre-trained transformer. And so that is the actual predictive model that has been trained to provide those outputs. And so you could sort of think of like GPT as like the universal aspects, even though GPT, the phrase, is very aligned with Chat GPT. That is the overall technology behind it that powers many of the LLM tools and producers out there. And a prompt is just special instructions provided to the LLM. You're just chatting with it. You're just talking with it. You're uploading a PDF. You're uploading a spreadsheet. It's just the way you communicate with the LLM. And then hallucinations, which is like a very human word that is like anthropomorphized on top of all of this. And that is just to sort of capture this false, wrong output that are generated by these models. And so often say the response has a hallucination in it. And then there's a bunch of other terms that you really don't need to know for now. I put them here to get people just ready for things that you might hear: vibe coding, MCP, context windows, agents, agentic development. Like, you don't need to know that to get started. It's helpful to know that those are, when you're on your journey, like, there are plenty of things to deep dive into, but that is absolutely not needed to get started. And yeah, this one. All right. A bunch of challenges with Gen AI. I sort of mentioned it previously. Gen AI is very often like confidently wrong, like just absolutely will provide you wrong information, wrong quotes, wrong citations, just pulling from nothing, but with the air of complete confidence, which is really challenging because you, on the other end, you're left with trying to discern, is that truth or is that fiction? Another big challenge is training bias. AI reflects training data. And so since all of that was trained on text on the internet, it really acts as like a mirror to our world. Human biases, cultural, societal biases. And we have to really intentionally review those outputs for the inclusivity that matches who we are in the sector. Right, organizational nuances. There's a lot of general aspects of what it will give back to you, and it's going to miss specific company culture, context, internal rules, everything around that. And then we went before, the complex vocabulary. It does not help for non-technical folks coming to the space where you have to learn a whole bunch of new vocab and acronyms. It's not helpful, and in fact adds to the imposter syndrome in some ways for all of this. And then finally, because like there are just a lot of limits to these systems. A lot of critical judgment remains with you all. You all are the experts. Don't let anybody ever tell you that you don't know, and that you haven't worked very hard to build your own internal gut expertise and intuition, because that is what's going to act in conjunction with Gen AI tools to make something so much more powerful afterwards. All right. Next Slido question. So we can navigate back to the browser. I'd love to just get an understanding of which tools have people previously used before, and we'll go through these tools as well. Lots of ChatGPT, Pilot, Claude, Gemini. So it's nice. It's almost like a little race. Let's see which one. Interesting, interesting. Alrighty. This is probably shaking out to what I thought. What was going to be the distribution between there? ChatGPT just has an enormous share of all of our minds, all of its, accessibility. And so very often, yeah, ChatGPT is definitely a tool that I'm glad to see people have explored. And ChatGPT is definitely a good one to start with. Copilot, I'm starting to give some indication there's a lot of Microsoft shop folks, and Copilot is very integrated into that suite. Sense. And some good love towards Claude and Gemini also, which is pretty great. All
Hey,
right.
Jasmine, just a question in the chat from
Hmm.
Gannon, which is also wondering why Google is embedding AI in their search engine if it doesn't
Hmm.
function as a search engine.
Yeah. That's a really great question. And I feel like if I would have a really good answer for you if I worked at Google. So I'm going to give you my very overly opinionated Jasmine answer. Is market share, right? Like there's no avoiding it. There's often like I think there's a discrepancy between like a product and a feature. And I think that's definitely what's happening. And it's odd, right? Because you're going to have the same issues about hallucinations and inaccurate information that comes up in those AI reviews. Also, if you happen to also be using the Chrome browser, you've got that Ask Gemini button up in the corner that nobody asked for and is just there. Sometimes it's helpful, but there's just so many ways in which, like, I think um, they're trying to test out in different forms and meet people where they are, so they don't have to go and provide traffic to ChatGPT or Anthropic. And so they want to keep everybody in the nice Google space. And so if you're using Chrome, which is a very popular browser, they want to keep you there. So that would be my like product like thought process. I'm not a fan of the AI responses in the browser because they're not good. They're not nuanced. But yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, it's everywhere. It can be a lot. Hopefully I answered that. It was more of opinion rather than fact. Alrighty. Cool. All right, the next. So we're going to go through a couple of popular Gen AI tools, actually the ones we just took that poll on. And so we'll start off with Claude. It's built by Anthropic company. They were founded about 2021, so recent company. They have a massive focus on AI safety and ethics, and you can see it throughout their product, their messaging, the thought they have behind their model releases and their interactions, especially with the nonprofit sector. Their like really superpower is like handling large, messy amounts of information, and that could be in a PDF, a doc, a spreadsheet, CSV, a PDF, all of it. It does really, really well at handling that massive amount of data. And it's often considered to be one of the best for like that human, if you're going for like a really personalized vibe with your LLM, um, human like writing, and it makes it really interesting when in terms of like using it for drafting a grant or deep step-by-step sort of critical thinking about a plan for a task. And then one of my favorite features about Claude is it has like this artifact aspect of where we'll start building out mini bits of visual interfaces within your whole chat conversation, which is really helpful for folks that are visual learners, or if you're asking it to build something a little bit more complex, thinking flowcharts and PowerPoint decks. Does a really great job of that. And I will probably say this now, Claude is my favorite tool, if you're asking and wondering. I'm sure everybody has their own favorites, but Claude is my absolute favorite. And then we have ChatGPT, by far like the industry leader in conversational AI, really the pioneer. It's how I got first started, how I know a lot of people, their entryway to learning about Gen AI, and figuring this all out. It is incredibly versatile. There's so many things that it can do. It's often the phrase multimodal, which means that it can do so many things, right? It can read images, it can create images, it can read large amounts of data. You can speak to it. You speak to actually very nearly all of these applications, which is really fantastic from an accessibility standpoint as well. And then it does a lot of really advanced data analysis, dropping a messy spreadsheet in and getting it to create professional charts. So it's been really interesting to see ChatGPT kind of lead the field in this Gen AI landscape. And then we have Gemini by Google, right? Deeply integrated with the Google ecosystem, massive context capability. So that means it could just have a really long conversation with you and retain information back that you're giving it back and forth. And so it's deeply integrated. So it's in browser. If you happen to use Google Slides, it's there. Google Sheets, Google Drive, like it's everywhere on Google products, and it's really another aspect of being very. All of them are very multimodal in that sense as well, and it processes data really, really well, and has like a very massive amount of context, so you can keep having conversations with it, which is really, really useful, especially if you are a Google Shop or Google Workspace organization. And then we have Copilot by Microsoft, deeply integrated into the Microsoft ecosystem. That's deeply integrated in Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook. It's almost like there's a different flavor for this and that, depending on what kind of camp you're in. And it has a lot of great strength in that integration, having complete access to all of the data that you enable with it. It can do a lot of things on summarization and threads and drafting reports, very similar to the other tools as well. There's an inherent aspect of enterprise grade security that's really built in when you're in sort of the Microsoft ecosystem. I know that can be really sensitive and a really important aspect as people seek to select a provider to integrate in. All right, so when you look at all of these are little screenshots. You can tell I did this part at night because it's all in dark mode. But it says, they all look really similar. And so when they all look like that, they're all waiting for a prompt, they're waiting for you to engage with it. Like what makes them different? Like if they all seemingly look the same, like which do I use? What makes sense? Um, and the difference is really not so on the outside, it's really like underneath. And some of them have very unique specialized strengths. And then we'll sort of look at what that looks like for different types of folks that are working in nonprofits. So let's say Ravi, a data manager, might use Claude to help write SQL queries and clean messy data sets. Jordan, donor relations officer, might use Copilot in Excel to do something very similar with donor data, identify opportunities to re-engage past supporters. Will, writing grants, might use ChatGPT to start that initial draft from a seed of information. And Vera, program director, might use Gemini to analyze programming data. So, right, there's a large amount of information that and tools that can be used for across the board, but it's how in which people use those specific tools, and that's based on your role, your use cases, and your task. And some of these are stronger in certain areas, and often you may not know that unless you explore and try all of them that you have access to.
Jasmine, the question from the chat from Amos, he says currently he has a subscription to Chat GPT and he pays $20 a month. Also has a subscription to Claude and pays another $20 a month. Question is there a service or platform where I can pay a single fee and have access to the best features of both AI models?
I think you just invented a brand new product. Is my response. Um, no, that is it's right now. It's definitely tool sprawl. It's the same aspect where you might have a Netflix subscription, Prime Video, all of these. Um, it's annoying, right? Managing two separate things to pay. If one of them could do something better or not, why don't I just pay less? I personally had started out like I paid for like one of each. I was using ChatGPT and Claude. This slide deck right now that we're on, this particular slide is my reason why I no longer pay for ChatGPT and no longer use it as like my primary tool. Um, and so another aspect of, if they all are slightly similar, and they all look the same and they're all starting to converge on getting really good at really similar tasks, even if they have specializations, um, that it's not just the software, it's the companies behind them. And AI tools, these are never neutral. The value of the vendors and the people that are building it make a huge difference, at least in my mind, about where you put your money, where you help support your staff learn and build up on a tool. And so this was a recent headline, just a month ago. I think this was back in February. Anthropic, who makes all of the Claude products, they refuse to drop their hard lines on surveillance, and autonomous weapons, whereas OpenAI took that contract from the Pentagon. This was a really like popular story. I believe, yeah, Claude shot to the top of the app downloads after that, and it's really important to have these considerations when you're choosing which tools. I think it's fine to explore at first. I think they all do a really great job, but I think when it comes time to decide, am I building all of my systems on a company that I aligns with my values, or am I building it in service of evil in a way? And so I think it's really important as nonprofit leaders to like have those vendor values as a core part of your due diligence. Like the vulnerable communities rely heavily on trust. And there comes a point when I think we're all going to have to decide, right? We're all going to have to hopefully converge. I mentioned this before. I love the Claude products, Claude Code, Claude Chat, Claude Design, Claude Cowork. And this is one of the reasons that just gave me more push to not pay for ChatGPT. I am not advertising like you all make your best decisions, but there are a compounding amount of reasons to make a choice if you want to, and help support your staff using software and tools that are ethically aligned to the sector. So hopefully that answers the question. I have just a ton of other subscriptions, so I get it. It's frustrating and expensive. All right. With that being said, we're going to go over a bit of prompting tips that are pretty universal, right? So if you're still like trying to figure out which tool is best, which tools that your staff really, really want to use, that's important to consider like that buy-in. These types of prompting tips are universal. And right, prompting is just the skill of giving the AI just clear instructions that can have just a lot more relevancy, a lot more usefulness, that help prevent you going back and forth and cleaning up the inevitable mistakes that AI might make. And so very often it's really good to start, if you're first starting out, to kind of have this kind of structure with your prompt, telling the AI like who it should act as, and maybe it is to act as your role. So it has that consideration. The mentioning the specific task, exactly what you want done, as specific as possible. A bit of context. You might write that. Maybe it's a specific type of nonprofit community that you're serving, as well as you might have a PDF of like a previous annual report that might make a lot of sense to upload in addition to your prompt. And then some constraints. You can ask for what you need, the tone of voice, the brevity or the verboseness, to avoid jargon. To sometimes I ask Claude to explain certain technical topics as if I was a 5-year-old. Just the whole gambit of what you want and what you need. Ask for it. So some examples of before and after. So a weak prompt, write a donor email. Um, One would hope that there would be more context to provide, and you can strengthen that by adding that, adding the role, adding the type and the tone of email that you want, some specificities around who it's targeting, and just some clearer notes. Uh, Having this sort of recipe for writing prompts in general is going to be just really helpful, from both what you're going to get out for an output, how you're going to be able to judge how well it did and how useful it is and how much tweaking you are going to have to do to it. So, all right, so we have a little activity. This is another browser-based activity. So you want to open up another tab. I believe Monica is going to put this URL in here, AI workshops apps 1 dailyanalytics.com. We will have another one in a bit, and it'll be a very similar URL. It just will go from 1 to 2 and same password, right? So this activity we're going to do, that you're all going to do, and feel free to come off mute and tell me what your results are. But this is really the conundrum I think a lot of folks are in as they're starting out. Like, which tool do I use? Do I pay for all of them? Do I join one camp or the other? And so I think it's really important to understand in terms of what you need to get done, right? Like, what is the right tool for the right job, rather than a blanket statement of like, this is the best tool that's ever existed. It's going to solve all of your tasks, and fit the bill. So if you're there on the app, you're going to enter the password, and then follow the instructions, describe a real task from your work, and you're going to get a bit of a tool recommendation and even a starter prompt that sort of goes through a lot of the tips that I listed before, and maybe some gotchas about what to watch out for. Another aspect in helping to choose which tool might be the right use is also which type of information that you're supplying it. Are you trying to use a Gen AI tool on data or information that's public, that is maybe internal, or maybe that is sensitive? And then it will hopefully provide a recommendation. If somebody who is further ahead and would like and has a result like to share with the group, and if you have any issues, let me know as well. Anyone there yet? I don't want to have to call on people.
Hi, I'm Claire with the Newington Children's Theater Company, and I actually just putting on some supporting materials for programs, and it came back with Canva Magic. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Can you repeat again what your prompt was?
Just supporting materials for some of our programming.
Interesting. So, uh, when I hear supporting materials, it does sort of feel like artifacts that might be for social media or emails and mailing. And Canva Magic came up because that's a really interesting tool for generating those types of artifacts, um, PDFs, images, documents. And so that would be a really interesting um, tool to use. Did it give you a starter prompt um, that had maybe a little bit more context to it as well?
So it just says it's create a flyer, handout, infographic, key information to include, just like the main points, the dates, the benefits, how to sign up.
Interesting. I'd imagine too with that more improved starter prompt, you might spend less time getting like a flyer together, getting those artifacts, which
Right,
is
right.
super interesting. No, but that's great. That's great to hear that. It's often like um it's great to put in those inputs that are a little bit more visual to see what you might get because all of these tools also produce visuals. And some of them do it better than others. Canva Magic does a little bit better as well because it's a more purpose-built tool for that. Great.
Right.
Awesome. Thank
I'm excited because that wasn't even on my radar. So thank you.
Awesome. Awesome.
Jasmine, actually, there's a good example. Mana from Connecticut Forum had put it in the chat. I wrote writing speeches with historical context and was suggested to use Perplexity is perfect for this because it can research current verified historical facts and cite its sources, ensuring your speech has accurate information. You can then use it to help structure and write the speech while being confident the facts are reliable.
Oh, that is awesome. Perplexity is another one. We may or may not touch on that, but I'll touch on it now. Perplexity is a really, really interesting tool. I use it specifically for research things of that nature, right? Where you need to crawl the web and get some like a little bit more like gut check sense that it's going to be accurate set of sources and citations. And so Perplexity does sound like that. I'm not trying to like wholesale agree with what the results are, but Perplexity is a really great tool for that. And yeah, I use it in parts of my workflow for research and those types of deep thinking questions. So
And then Jasmine, there are two, Susan and Angie. Susan says Claude for writing a policy regarding payments to individuals for business services. And Angie says Claude for marketing language with high understanding of emotional nuance.
that emotional nuance, that's a big chunk of words. That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think that is a really interesting take at given the task. Um, yeah, I would have to like in my mind, like in using all of these tools, what you all are getting for results, that's most likely what I end up doing as part of different workflows. I said I'm a big Claude fangirl, but I do use lots of other tools because some tools do things better, some are more purpose built. Um, will also say before we move on, this tool is a custom tool that I built for these workshops that I do. The back end of this is talking to Claude. So it's also really interesting to get like that pseudo honest, predictive model engine perspective of a tool recommending another tool because it might be better for that particular task. And so I love that. Hopefully you all got um, a bit of interesting aspects of it. I have a hand raised. Please ask your question.
Hi, I just wanted to just comment on this tool that you shared with us that you said you created. It's very helpful, especially I love the feature that if you want it, if it public, internal messaging, because as we're looking into AI, that's my concern of staff understanding where the information is going that we're entering and discerning because we just see AI, but sometimes we don't see the depth of where the information is being broadcasted to, or is it being used to teach the language model how to keep everything private? So I really appreciate this and the fact that it gives you suggested prompts. It gives you reasoning. So thank you for this. Really love it.
Of course, of course. If it wasn't mentioned in some of the handouts, I will keep this password active for like the next couple days. Feel free after this is over, keep exploring, keep playing around. I think this building up this judgment of trying to find the right tool for the right job and trying to be coached in terms of what that right prompt, what are some things to look after is really helpful. So please feel free to explore and experiment with these tools and this app. And email me if it breaks. I'll fix it for you. It shouldn't, but awesome. All right, so that is module one. Bit of just kind of recap of what we've been going over. So hopefully we can all kind of explain a bit more about what AI is, what Gen AI is, using some new terminology, also highlighting some common misconceptions when discussing it with others. We did a little review of kind of like the big four in terms of really popular AI tools. We got to navigate and use an AI tool independently. That was an app that I just built for you all, which uses AI. And then learn how to write some clear and effective prompts that hopefully produce some really useful outputs. And by useful, I like to put quotes on it, right? We want to spend less time going back and forth. We want to provide all of the context that's needed so we can have a really accurate sense of information. So I'll have a little, how's everybody feeling? I do have like a break for coffee if everybody needs, or if there's any more questions we can ask. Like, I am flexible. And I can't see the chat, so holler loudly at me.
A quick break would be helpful.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Awesome. And I will be here just moseying around. So, but if you do have a question, feel free, ask. But yeah, we'll have a break, maybe like five-ish, 10-ish minutes. But yeah, awesome. See you guys in a bit.
So Jasmine, when should folks be back? Just so folks know how to plan. What time?
Let's shoot for 10:55.
Sure, 10:55. We'll all be back.
10:55. Yeah, perfect.
Jasmine, is there anything that you need from me? I'm going to step away for just a sec, unless I'm needed.
I'm all set. Thank you so much, Monica, for offering.
Sure. Sure.
Jasmine, there is a question from Mana in the chat. She's saying, curious about the value of nonprofit organizations pursuing organization-wide subscriptions, and if anyone on the Zoom has done that. I guess that's partly a question for the group, and whether it's benefited them.
And I can wait till everybody's back. You don't have to answer it now, but that was just my question. Thanks, Mayor. Because companies are doing it everywhere. And I'm trying to understand if it does make sense for a nonprofit to pursue that as well. Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Jasmine, as well.
Oh yeah, I love that question. I'm trying. I should have like a better like printout of my whole slide deck, but it may or may not come up. But so I'm gonna answer your question now. When I talk with organizations, they have that exact same question. And that is really just kind of wrapping around like shadow AI, shadow IT usage. And we really want to tamp that down, because when we have that going on, people having their own personal accounts, whether it's free or paid for, you all have no idea what is going on, what is being entered, what's being, whether, and it's not to say people are being malicious. People have very deep intention probably about what they're doing, but it's also really easy to submit something that should not be in these tools. And when you have personal accounts, whether they're paid or not, you don't have the same set of enterprise-wide agreements as explicitly stated that say, you will not be using our data for training. And so I really advocate for folks, buy the enterprise accounts, get those explicit agreements set up with the provider OpenAI, Anthropic, any of them, and make it very clear that your data is yours and not to be used for training purposes.
Thank you, Jasmine. You just opened up 1,000 other Pandora questions in this Pandora's box. So if you're looking at it from a different perspective, are you also making the case that individual team members who may be utilizing these various tools for work, like we should perhaps dissuade them because they might be transferring data unintentionally, not with any purpose other than just to better enhance their work, but are we potentially complicating things? And thank you, Adriana, for your point. That's really interesting. Oh, sorry, I
Yeah, I
should read
would.
Adriana's point. She says, I'm working on an AI policy for my organization.
Yeah, I would definitely dissuade. And if anything, it's like the carrot and the stick. There's a lot of really great benefits that come with enterprise accounts. A lot more interesting features, collaborative sharing. It's really beneficial for all parties. I know
Mhm.
folks like it's. I also tend to look at like AI policies or guidelines or playbooks. Like it's not necessarily like compliance for compliance sake. There's like a very real aspect in terms of the reducing like the risk surface area, but
Mhm.
also for folks to get bought in and supporting that and being good stewards of the data and being good stewards of the organization.
Mhm.
Like also telling them like there's so many really awesome things that come with it. Like there's so much great support from the account execs at that particular vendor. There's some really great features. There's probably additional limits in terms of like how much you can like hammer on some of these tools. You can have longer conversations, you can have longer uploads, greater access, fidelity with different types of connectors to your outside system. So yeah, like I would, yeah, everybody should be on enterprise accounts.
That's really interesting. And I'll read Adriana's point just now. Currently, no one is to use AI for work until we build the policy. We are a small team. And Adriana, we are a small team too, but we've not even thought like all of what you just said, Jasmine, is like blowing up my mind because we haven't really thought through that kind of collective mentality of how people should be using AI. Everybody's doing their own thing and they use it whenever they want. So that's really, really helpful.
It's it's really interesting because I think like it's definitely like trying to balance compliance and experimentation and innovation while also trying to keep people safe, but also trying to give people the tools that they want to do their job effectively.
Yeah.
So it's very, I think this like it's also like a living document.
Uh-huh.
I am working with organizations right now, like, and they have previously written an AI policy, and it's a year old and it's incredibly stale. And it needs a lot of revamping.
Wow.
And so also treating this exercise as like you're going to probably come visit an AI policy in a document like quarterly. We're going to
Oh,
assess the
wow.
landscape. We're going to assess what are the new features that you're able to do. I'm immersed in this stuff every day. I have a very hard time keeping up, to be totally honest. The new models, the new tools, the new features, the new things to look out for or to watch. It is certainly a lot, but also keeping in mind if you have your policy and your guidelines flexibly enough to revisit them, like I think you could stay on par with the advancement and the development for sure.
Thank you so much for that. That's really helpful. And thanks, Adriana. I appreciate your points as well. And Micah, Mayor, do you want to read Micah's or would you like for me? I've just taken over reading while you've been gone.
I can also read it
Go for
out.
it,
I just
Mona. Go for it.
process better written.
Go ahead.
So I had said that we have been trying to work on developing an AI policy here at Compass, and we're running into a lot of the similar concerns. Like we started this thought process over a year ago. I am on a 3-person data team, which is already a lot larger than most organizations. And we haven't been able to keep up with and manage this as much as we try to. And we're really concerned about the ethics and risk of using it as a direct service organization that collects and is responsible for very deeply personal and identifiable personal information for our participants. We also are really struggling with how to even enforce an AI policy and restrict that like shadow AI that we know people are using, even though currently we have a strict no use policy. And especially with, as you've all mentioned, the speed of change with this technology, it really is a full-time job just to try to keep up with change, update the policies, and manage the use, as well as have the level of oversight for however it's being used and have some sort of like human approval process for it, that we already struggle with having time enough to approve the actual human work that we're doing. And so I don't know what that, I started to type up a follow up to that of like, I don't know if it is worth the trade-off of the time it takes to learn, keep up with all of that, and then the time it takes to implement it versus what it is saving time on, maybe, question mark, and the time that it's pulling away from the team to deliver those services for our participants.
Thank you for that. And also, hi, Micah.
Hi, Jasmine.
I will say specifically too with one organization I'm working with, in addition to updating their year-old AI policy that's stale, they're also looking at figuring out the hiring plan, and I'm helping them about a embedded person as team who are solely focused on AI operations and enablement, sort of linking with learning and development folks. It is 100% several people's whole job at this point, and it's really important to also like respect the folks that are there, but they can't also become the de facto AI experts. It's really, really challenging, a lot to keep up with. So yeah, definitely.
And we don't have the like budget and capacity to hire a specific person for this, like, especially if it's not directly aligned with the mission of the organization. It's a hard sell in that regard.
Definitely. Oh man. Let's see where we're at. We're at time. People are back. Lovely. So I think we're gonna thank you so much for the coffee chat, all of this. This is lovely, and very, very timely. So I have a question for you all. We can keep this fun and light and put it in the chat as we keep going. I want to know how nerdy you all are, but more specifically, what type of media that you've seen, TV, film, books, that has maybe influenced your perception of AI technology. Got some really great examples. My kids love Wally. Ones that really kind of stick out to me in terms of like actually, I think all three of these films have a weird takeaway message, but Terminator is the most probably salient, scary thing. But yeah, please share with others like what has been shaping your thought to around all of this, because it's hard not to keep these parts separate, the fact and the fiction, as we figure out where we're all going with this. And since I can't see the chat, or maybe I can, let me see. Let's see. Ex Machina, yeah. Skynet, yeah. The Matrix, yeah. I thought I knew we would hint on the Matrix at the end. One of my favorite movies, set of movies growing up. Podcast too. Yeah. Awesome. Don't Look Up. That scared me. I will not watch that a second time. All right. So we'll move on to the next module. Keep things moving. Productivity, automation. So we'll kind of go over some practical applications that could take form and shape in your daily mission-driven work. And sort of like to generally kind of categorize that after seeing the tools and how they might show up. Some of like the kind of big main buckets to kind of focus on is content creation. So if you're like staring at something, you're like, I don't know where to begin. I don't know where to start. Using Gen AI and these kind of tools in a productivity way for brainstorming is really valuable. I've had a lot of great use cases lot of good ideas, a lot of bad ideas, but getting the opportunity to sort them out has been really helpful. And that is really helpful for productivity. Second kind of bucket of use cases is summarization. So you have like a large multi-page document that you want summarized, or you have a board meeting transcript that you want sent out and summarized. Having a Gen AI tool to say, hey, look at this, give me 5 takeaways, and turn potentially large amounts of reading and synthesis into a really nice, clean format of summarization is a really interesting kind of productivity use case. And then organization, so planning, logistics, creating to-do lists is all really a really nice bucket in terms of productivity. And then data analysis as well. I think as a data scientist working, I would see a lot of people using Gen AI to produce charts and to analyze data, and I would get scared. But also, how lovely it is that more people have access to new tools and new skills and can learn, and we're not gatekeeping things. So there's some positives in that as well, that you don't need to necessarily be an Excel wizard. You can do a bit of that with using Gen AI tools. So, but as use cases are sort of like generalized, I really want to point out like humans like must stay in the driver's seat. And there's a bit of concept around human in the loop and making sure how do we not lose that human touch. This is a really frequent concept in like the AI and tech space. I often like to say human in and on the loop because you're not a passive viewer from outside. You're also within the workflow and the system, ensuring its accuracy so that AI is not operating in a vacuum. And so to sort of manage this partnership between the AI tools and yourself, there's a really great framework called the 4D framework. And we'll go into a bit of details around how to think about staying in control of AI. And so it's kind of these 4 buckets developed by these professors and kind of in collaboration with Anthropic. It's a real human-centered approach to designing a way for people and teams to work safely with AI that's also ethical. And it moves sort of beyond the kind of conversational aspect of the prompts and the prompt engineering and tend to focus on like these 4 competencies around how you interact. And so we'll go into each one in depth. So delegation. So deciding like who does what before using AI, decide how the work should be divided, know which tool that you're going to use, and figure out and help assign whether it's you, whether it's a teammate, whether it's the AI tool, and what role that all shapes and forms, and assign the work. The description. And so this is a bit more about the prompting, but it's really not like a one and done thing. It's really about like treating whatever you get out of a Gen AI tool is the first draft. You're going to be able to provide feedback both to the AI to make several iterations and to keep refining it, and then learning what that performance and that tone and that style should eventually be. So having that really great description that includes all of the context, the social context, the task, the mission orientation of what you're trying to get out of it, and describe it really clearly. Another aspect as well of this whole framework of thinking is discernment. Trusting, but always verifying. AI outputs always require human, us people to look, to inspect, to judge, to determine if the facts are correct, determine if that quote that they pulled out is attributed to the right person or the right source, check the relevancy, and then keep refining the prompt, keep refining the instruction. It's very, very critical. And it's really about not saying no, right? It's trying to give people the opportunity to say the safe yes as part of this process. And then the diligence, really owning the output. Your name is on this, your name is on that account, your name is on that document, that chart, like you are accountable for it. The AI did this, that, and the third is not a correct response. It's not a good excuse. The communities we serve like rely on that trust and that goodwill, and their needs depend on this. And it's really important to help us ensure that like the AI, its output doesn't feel robotic or deceptive or just inaccurate. And I really am a really big believer as well as like I'm a nerd. I love all this stuff. It's cool. We should use it. But also it's we should use it if it's going to make us more effective, if it's going to make us more accurate, if it's going to enable us to have a better sense and pride in our joy of showing up to work every day. It should enable us. It should not replace us. It should not take the spot of us. It is very important that you all and your values stay incredibly integral to this whole process and thinking about how to leverage AI in its various forms in your work. So this is a super common thing that I hear, and this is part of the excitement and the miscommunication and the inaccuracies that like AI is going to save you so much time. Yay, that's awesome. Maybe it does. Fantastic. That is just really not true. And I think when you're deep in what you're doing and you're going through the 4D framework and you're getting access to tools and you're figuring things out, at the end of the day, you're realizing that you are arriving and leaving at work at the same exact time. Your mental energy is shifted. You are now moving from the creation to the judgment and the discernment and the strategy, and you're shifting that over to now being the fact checker. And that shift is okay, but it's very important to understand that like we are not going to get a magical 4 hours back a day because we leverage Gen AI in our workflow. There was a very concerning Super Bowl commercial that I like to keep bringing up recently, and it was this company, and it was people at the end, oh, submit that task, let the AI write this PowerPoint, close the machine, we're going to go out for a drink later. That is not the right messaging. That is not what happens in actuality. That is setting people up to not be in a good spot in a relationship with these tools and systems because you are responsible for the outputs. You need to be in and on the loop when it comes time to answer for what you're producing. And it's the unfortunate aspect of people just keep saying it. I'm going to keep pushing that you are not saving time. You are swapping and reallocating your time. And so we have another little activity again. So if you go back to your browser, this is another application that's going to sort of help you to sort of demonstrate that about how AI doesn't save your bandwidth, your mental bandwidth, it reallocates it. So similar URL, but instead of that one from previously, we've got two, and then same password. And then we're going to be able to follow a bit of the instructions. So you're going to be able to enter a task. Maybe it's a work-related task. I would love for anybody to also put in a non-work-related task too, to see what they might get as an output. And feel free, once you get a result back, to share with the group, like what were your results in terms of execution and judgment and what that particular task was. Let me know if you have issues too. All right. Who wants to share?
I was talked about writing a grant proposal for a documentary, and this feels very accurate. It said, without AI, it'd be 60% execution, 40% judgment. And with AI, 25% execution and 75% judgment. And that's one thing I found, and I don't know if anybody else has experienced this, but you can often really tell when something's been written by AI. I'm in the nonprofit sort of historical sphere, but I'm trained as a scientist. And one of the things that I learned was just really spare, clear language, which is the antithesis of what the sort of vomit that you often get out of AI, that it's almost like it's trying to impress you by using too many words. I don't know.
Well, thanks for sharing. I'm glad that it sort of resonated too, like
Yeah.
the roundabout percentages, but really sort of
Yeah.
demonstrate like for that particular task, what you would have done previously, what would you have done afterwards.
Yeah. But
Does
some of it
anybody?
seems like almost, I mean, right, you have the same bandwidth. But also like by the time you spent 60% on the execution, I mean, theoretically, you've had the judgment going on progressively or iteratively as you write, but you're also all you have left is 40% to use.
Yeah. No, thanks for sharing. Yeah, it's really interesting, I think, to see that laid out in terms of like the percentage of your time, your the mental energy you might spend, the amount of skills that you might spend on a particular task. Did anybody happen to enter like a non-work related task, like walking my dog? I'm just curious.
I did do a couple non-work related tasks that I think are interesting. So I do pottery, ceramics, and some of my free time. And I was just curious because that obviously is not something that AI can do. And it did show no change in that prompt. But I also entered after that writing a grocery list for a weekly vegan meal plan. And I thought that the response for that is interesting. So the without AI is 60% execution, 40% judgment. And the execution is brainstorming meals, checking pantry, writing down ingredients, versus with AI, 15% execution and 85% judgment. And then the execution, it says typing prompts, copying AI generated lists, and then the judgment of that is evaluating those suggestions. But that is curious to me, especially for the fact that the AI, like I would have to spend an equal amount of time checking my pantry to tell AI that those pantry items are like out of stock essentially, for it to not include those or to include those. So I don't think that that is a fully representative response for the time or judgment, or sorry, not judgment, execution saved on that task.
Yeah, that's a great call out because it's missing all of that. That's context, like,
Mhm.
and
That you
that's
still
it's
have to human generate.
yeah, you absolutely do. And yeah, thank you for entering that like maybe fun or silly, non-work related, but very personal thing. And yeah, I think it's interesting to also see as you're maybe going from your work tasks over to can I use Gen AI to plan a vacation? Like what what are things that you delegate over? What are parts of your mental bandwidth that get used or not? And it's very personal. It's very specific, very context heavy. But yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing.
Osmond, Tyler is asking, is this a tool, something we can test out after the session? It really is interesting to explore. And also there was a question earlier about the right tool, right job. Like, could they use this after the workshop?
Yes to both. I will. The URL is active. I'll leave the password active for let's say this time next week. You have access to it. Please feel free to experiment and play around. And if it's helpful, I'm glad. So, of course. Cool. All right. So we'll move on to a little bit more about some very popular Gen AI tools for specific use cases. So we've gone through some of the more general purpose aspects, creation, summaries, data analysis, sort of getting into like how do we not like lose our like human touch and our flow and our certain pizzazz that we have on the work that we do. Um, and then, so we'll sort of get into, the purpose-built things for very specific use cases. So the first one up, this tool called Notebook LM. If you have, it's created by Google. So if you have Google Workspace with them, you have access to Notebook LM. It's very interesting in terms of a tool that allows you to create sort of mini projects. You upload files, reports, you can upload particular URLs to resources, and the tool can summarize them. It can help answer questions only specifically constrained to what you've given it access to. I use it a lot for initial brainstorming. Sometimes I have just like a bunch of PDFs and I've got a URL to this, that, and the third. And it really helps to sort of kind of containerize things. And I have it through Google Workspace. So I find it to be really, really helpful. I think it's really great for that kind of research assistant mode. It can make PowerPoint decks, flow charts, visual aspects of it. And then, can turn all of those documents into synthesized reports, slide decks, flashcards, briefing summaries. And so really interesting tool, Notebook LM. Does anybody use Notebook LM? Maybe in the chat or raise hands. I can't see the chat physically. Notebook LM, anybody? All right. Maybe some Notebook LM fans after this. All right. So the next one is kind of going to look similar to one of the general purpose tools that we just talked about, but I think it's really worth calling out since it is become more general access, and that is Claude Cowork. Claude Cowork is an agentic. So I said you didn't have to know this word, and you don't, but I just want to kind of say it here in terms of what it is. It really moves beyond just the standard chat interface. There is still an interface, but it can take on really complex multi-step tasks, can have a bit of more automation. It can work on your local machine, navigating files, folders, executing those steps, moving files around. That may excite you, that might scare you. You could do a lot of scheduled on-demand tasks. Let's say having your, I take a lot of screenshots often and they're all cluttered. Once a day, I have a Claude Cowork thing, a task, go through and reorganize them by date, put them in a particular folder. And it runs automatically as long as I keep my computer on. So that's a really useful kind of tool in the automation step.
I have a question about that. It just occurs to me, we have archives, and we have done scans of lots of archival photos that we have, but a lot of those are now older and they're not high, I'm like having word problems this morning, but they're not high quality, they're not high resolution. And we just have like piles of folders, like our whole directory of our basically shared drive of all our stuff. Can I throw this at it and say, hey, look at the pictures and compare them and tell me which ones are duplicates, or is that maybe not?
I think that'd be a really interesting use case. I would caution, so this is, right, it's really interesting automation, but I would caution against any kind of like destructive actions.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't let it make any choices.
Don't make it. Don't let it start deleting files.
Let it rate them or something.
Yeah, and then also like providing it context of like, or asking it like, tell me what you did afterwards and where you put things is really helpful to kind of act as like a QA check, quality assurance check.
Yeah.
But yeah, a task like that sounds like that would be worthwhile to at least test out on maybe a subset, like a smaller bit of those files first before doing a full blown, here, have access to my computer, because that is also potentially dangerous. Potentially could have access to something you didn't intend it to have access to, like PPI data. Like just I would caution. I think there's a lot of really cool things you can do with automation, but I would start small and then extrapolate if it makes sense, and then you trust the outputs in its process. But
The good news is we're not subject to HIPAA. We don't really have PPI because it's all historical
That's good.
stuff. But still, caution. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. No, that's great. Awesome. All right, we'll go another tool. If you haven't heard before, it's called Zapier. This tool connects different software tools and automates a lot of repetitive tasks between them. Let's say you get a particular type of email and you want it logged in a Google Sheet, or you want it to ping a Slack channel with a particular person, a particular message, or you want to take some action off of some other type of trigger. Zapier is really, really interesting, kind of like this digital glue between all these different platforms and systems, right? Slack, Airtable, Salesforce, Gmail. They all have these like connectors and interfaces that are really interesting. It's a really popular tool for helping that automation go, right? Especially as a lot of these tools are like third-party cloud-based tools. I want to highlight Otter, which is an AI meeting assistant tool that records, transcribes, summarizes meetings automatically. I love meeting transcriptions tools. It allows me to be really present, except for when they don't work, and then I'm like cursing their name because I have to go back to writing with my hand, and that is challenging. But it's available in many different platforms. There's a lot of really great use cases, capturing notes from staff meetings, planning sessions, turning those discussions into action items, and maybe those action items could get linked up in Zapier and they go to that particular person. Just really interesting amounts of things now that we can record meetings, transcribe them, analyze the sentiment, and analyze like what are the particular action items. But I also want to call out there are a lot of AI assistant tools for meetings, like an overwhelming amount. It's completely overwhelming if you're trying to pick one. I'd say try them out and see what one fits. I use Tactique, I've used Fathom before, I've used Read AI, like all of them. There's a lot of tools. I do see a hand raised, Stacy. Please ask your question.
Yeah. Hi. Let me, that's going to bother me until I do it. Our staff is asking to use these tools. And as Micah said, our meetings are very, have a lot of their special education meetings, their meetings with Department of Children and Families and things like that. So we told staff they cannot use these out of concern for client data and information. Just trying to, that just feels like the right reaction and to be prudent, but I don't know if we're being overly restrictive or if there are some tools that are more protective that we should consider. But this has become a big topic for our legal staff.
Yeah, I'm going to say one more comment, then I'll let Marcus kind of chime in as well. I think if you have those hard lines and they're very custom to your organization, there's nothing wrong with doing that. Having people take notes by hand, unless they're like missing a lot of like glaring nuance in their conversations, like I think to protect the mission and the people and the sensitive populations, like do what you need to do. I will say there's certain tools like of an organization that is working in granola, they have data retention rules. They also have some of those transcripts that are only stored locally. They're not stored in a cloud system anywhere. And then they like sort of auto delete. Nobody has access to it. So there's different kind of configurations you can have if staff are like really like, I would really love to have a meeting transcription tool. Like there are some tools out there that a little bit more data sensitive and privacy sensitive. Marcus, please chime in.
I actually have separate question, but I did just think of something else to add to this. I have something that I've done in the past is I've actually pulled the data and privacy pages of different organizations and actually fed it into AI and say, review this and what concerns, like what red flags do you see in this policy versus this other policy? So if you are considering using different tools, that's one way to help just read through that data is to, and again, I understand that you're using the AI to help you decide on using other AI products. So you do, again, have to trust but verify. But that is something that, the data retention and just like looking for these certain items that fall more in line with your data policies is something you can do. But I have a separate question when it's appropriate about um, being in the Microsoft ecosystem and whether it makes sense to use these other tools if we have to upload our information for them to learn about us versus Copilot already having access to everything, but whenever that's appropriate.
Um, I'm going to noodle on here. I'm going to give you a quick response and then I'm going to noodle on it. And then if you wouldn't mind staying for like the Q&A, I might have a more well-formed answer. So I'm going to give you a short response based on an organization that I'm working with in that they just find Copilot's responses to be terrible. It may have all the access, it may have all the context. The underlying models are just not good for them. And so they have an enterprise chat GPT account. They have Claude. And so we're trying to like not have tool sprawl, not have a subscription to everything. But it's just for some folks, it's not doing as promised. And so unfortunately, like there are, like Claude, which isn't right as embedded as like Gemini or Copilot. It has a better model for a lot of tasks. So let me keep noodling more.
Sure.
But yeah, what I've heard is that and I don't use Copilot very often. I've used it like half a percentage of my time. Like it's just not a tool that I go to.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for your question.
Jeff, and there are a couple of other questions in the chat. Do you want to keep going or do you want to take those questions now?
Can we keep going? And then I will definitely stay as long as people need me to answer, because I have a goldfish brain and I'll just get really nerd sniped.
Okay.
Awesome. Awesome. Cool. All right. So catching back, there's a lot of different AI assistant tools for meetings. It's just kind of easy to build these types of tools and products and features. I think there will be a lot of differentiation coming and there will be less choice eventually because there's just a lot. And that makes it really challenging to figure out what it is. And Zoom has one already embedded in their own. That's not even list. So yeah, a bit about, right? All these tools, they can look similar. They have similar outputs. But it's all in how they might use these particular purpose-built tools, right? Using Zapier to automatically sync maybe volunteer signups for a web form to spreadsheets to a database. Somebody might use Perplexity, as mentioned before, right? Performing deep research. They might use Notebook LM to analyze reports. So we start to like have this distillation of these really general purpose chat only kind of specific tools to a point in time where we have just like, it's a meeting transcription tool. It does that one job. It does it very well. It does, deep research and does that one very well. And that's important to, right? You don't want to have a bunch of tools to govern, to pay for, to train folks on, but sometimes you're trying to balance, right? Like the compliance and the innovation and using tools that are just really, really good for that particular task. All right. So we're at the end of module 2. And so just to recap, we went over a bit of going through the 4D framework, trying to get an understanding of how we all stay in the mix, in and on the loop in Gen AI. And then we did a little bit of overview of some purpose-built specific AI tools. And then, but conceptually on like the mental bandwidth shift about how AI, while can be very helpful, is not going to allow us all to be laying on a hammock. I don't know that will ever come. I don't want that to come. I like to do things. But yes. All right. So in lieu of questions here, we're going to save them questions at the end. So we can have lots of time for just discussion as well. So we'll go on to the next section if that's okay with everybody. All right. So probably the section that I'm most excited to hear your all's thoughts and kind of feelings on is really like the ethical and responsible implications and use cases of AI and how to ensure that it is values aligned. It's really important to have that frame of reference in what you're doing as you're writing AI policy, as you're writing playbooks, as you're picking a particular vendor. This is such a important, like unavoidable component of all of this work. So I have a discussion. And so this is a unmute yourself from Zoom if you feel comfortable. If you found out that somebody had used AI for a particular task, like what is that task and would you like kind of judge them for it? So some examples kind of see the kind of discussion, like if you found out that somebody wrote their wedding vows using ChatGPT, would you have a little bit of judgment for them? Like, would it feel less sincere? Like,
It would feel like, why couldn't you write them yourself? I mean, it's one thing to write a report, including all kinds of data sources and stuff like that. But, your anniversary card or wedding vows.
One example I heard recently was that someone searched the population or like asked ChatGPT the population of Hartford. And this was in a like workshop training about like census data. So I was just kind of dumbfounded by that particular example within that context.
You mean like where you could just look at the census itself and see the information?
Yeah, like the data set that we're here to learn about.
Yeah.
I would say poetry or fiction.
Okay. An AI written poem, just why? Yeah, no, that's interesting. There's quite a lot of AI books coming out. Any thoughts or same line, just like
it can't replace human creativity. It's, a 5-year-old in some ways makes connections between things that a predictive model just, it's kind of amazing. I mean, it's probably advanced from this, but when you've heard about some of the crashes, like with Teslas, where it can't differentiate between like a white truck crossing the roadway and an overpass, that's like one of those things where like a 6-year-old can look and say that's a bridge and we can go under it. And yet that's a really difficult thing for the predictive model. And so sometimes they're not better at it.
That makes sense.
The New York Times had a little quiz a while ago that was fiction, and you had to guess which passage was written by a human and which passage was written by AI. And it was surprisingly difficult to tell the difference. There was one that I'm not suggesting I'm by any means an expert in anything, but I do read a lot. And so I thought it would be a little bit more obvious. And with one exception, it really wasn't obvious at all. And that bummed me out in a big way.
Yeah. There's a lot of crappy writing out there, though, just among humans.
But yeah, but like I said, this was not that. Believe me, I wish I were telling you something totally different. And I'm not. And it was like fiction. It wasn't research writing. It was meant to be fictional passages of a novel. And it was really sad.
So I have a good one. This one's actually kind of funny. I know this guy who used AI to answer like potential girlfriend's texts.
Oh God.
And when she found out what he was doing, I'm like, oh, that's like Cyrano de Bergerac, but like AI, and she dumped him pretty quickly. So I thought that was funny.
Good for her.
Yes. I think Ruth, did you have a comment as well?
I think I was going to say that I think it's kind of problematic if you present if you present the work as your authentic work. I mean, they're human. Let's face it, AI is taking the human out of like our work, our connections, how we think, what we write, those things. And it's really important. I think it's AI can be used to supplement, like if you've written something and you want to make sure that what you've written is cohesive, type of thing, but to actually use AI to generate a whole text will be in full judgment.
Maggie, you have your hand raised.
Hi, Miss Jasmine. I am not in the judging area, but my concern is for our kids, our young people. Because if they have an assignment to do and they rely on AI alone, when they have to think for themselves, how are they going to manage? I mean, those of us who are on here that are adults, we already passed certain stage and we understand life. But for them, when real life sets in, if they don't have that knowledge from inside, if they just depend on AI alone, what's going to happen to them when they don't have AI to react at the time when they need that knowledge. That's my concern, not really to judge. So if we can focus on that a bit, because I'm from the islands, and then you have to learn your ABCs, you have to know the months of the year, you have to repeat them, and it stays with you for the rest of your life. But having AI as a tool, which is good, but I think if we can come up with ways that they can think for themselves and use AI as an assistant, um, instead of, having AI do the work for them. That's where my concern is, because we want to make sure that when they get into a position of leadership, that they know what they're talking about. You know what I mean? Because,
Yeah.
for example, what we are seeing now is a whole lot of foolishness, and some of our leaders don't know what they're talking about because they don't have the understanding and the knowledge. So that is where my concern is for our young people.
Takes the learning out of learning.
Yeah. Yeah, these are really, really great thoughts and just a wonderful conversation. Yeah, if there's any other one, like, please feel free to keep the chat going. I personally, like, I will be keeping lots of devices and AI away from my own children. Um, when I teach them how to code, they will be doing it the hard, frustrating way, because that builds character. It builds true knowledge and intuition. Because, right, what if all of this disappears? I don't think it will. But what if it does? How will people know how to, have the resiliency to face new problems? How will they know, what the stretches of their imagination could possibly be, if they're using this tool as the sole mechanism for their information? So yeah, I feel very, very strongly about that in terms of the what we're going to be seeing in terms of the education system and how that's integrated in. So
it maybe an analogy would be, it's sort of like, I mean, and this will, I grew up in the Stone Age, but we weren't allowed to use calculators in school. And actually, for me, that was a problem because I have a sort of non-processing or non-verbal processing disorder. So backwardsing things is sort of my superpower. But if I can use a calculator, I can, is sort of the kind of brute force, um, uh, you know, just math as opposed, well, not math, just like calculation. I mean, I understand, the process. I understand what multiplication is, but instead of memorizing the tables, so maybe AI can be used somehow similarly, where it's helping us do the work, but it doesn't, you're not failing to learn the concepts.
No, definitely. It's definitely, I think, a topic for all of us to be involved in, educators, folks in the school system, folks in nonprofit supporting school systems. So yeah, no, it's a really interesting time. Thank you all for the lovely discussion. We're gonna move on. I do want to hear more of this though in the chat, so please feel free to chat more. Thank you so much. Awesome. So a little bit about data privacy and a bit about AI policy. So we've got a Zoom poll. Does your organization have an AI policy? Please feel free to answer. Oh, I love these not sure questions. If you're going to have a favorite, it's not sure. That's just a host of different things occurring. Awesome. Good guesses, some good no's. I would say this time last year, if this poll was run, the same type of group, we'd have even less yeses. So seeing this at the moment is very interesting in terms of having about 20% of folks, right, that have an AI policy. Awesome, cool. For our not sure or our no folks, it's just some helpful tips about operating without your safety net, operating and doing a bit more on self-advocacy. And a lot of nonprofits are still figuring this out. Like this workshop is probably part of the journey, right? And figuring out and articulating what your staff and your nonprofit are going to be able to do, what they can't do. And so some little rules to follow though in the intermediate where you don't have an AI policy, right? In doubt, like default to very strict privacy, like no personally identifiable information, no client data, no social security numbers. I have to say that explicitly. Things of that nature, sensitive information around vulnerable populations, children, all that. And don't wait for like there to be an AI policy to have that discerning take on what you enter into these tools, whether it's an enterprise account or your own personal account that you're using for work. And right, somebody mentioned before, like don't use shadow AI. If you use something to help with your AI, your particular task, being as transparent as possible is the best way forward. And so, yeah, you should always comply if there's any other type of IT or data privacy or security policies in place. Those are your also helpful friends in lieu of not having a policy yet. Yeah, the goal is really to help people move from like secretly using these tools to transparently piloting these tools and bringing everybody along for the ride in terms of capacity building and really collaboratively developing both a policy and the guidelines and the systems in place. So just reiterating again, number one rule, it's private or very confidential. It stays out of your system and your tools. Express that to staff members, board members, just does not stay, does not get included. And having sometimes really strict boundaries between personal accounts and work accounts, if at all possible. Right, don't let anything. And we talked a little bit about, and I'm sure we'll talk about this in the Q&A, having an enterprise account versus having a personal account, you will be able to explicitly opt out of data training and sharing and all the particularities around that are a really huge risk. And so really, really important to have that in front of mind as you're scoping and just understanding the risk given what the specificities are of your organization. And a little helpful way of thinking about this in terms of like kind of like stoplights. So green, go, you can use AI, right? Drafting any kind of like public facing content with public information using Gen AI to brainstorm new ideas, creating kind of templates. Social media posts is a great use case for that. We talked about a little bit Canva Magic as well, another suite of Canva tools. Yellow, like proceed with caution. It's a mixture of like this data may be internal, may eventually be public, but be cautious in terms of how you're entering it, verify it. If it's doing a particular calculation, it is a math underlying engine, but sometimes it's not good at math. And it's also not good at dates often too. So verify what it's creating, what it's doing, especially if you're getting to the point where you're generating code or generating things that are incredibly technical. Have somebody who knows what they're looking at help you verify it. And then the absolute kind of red light, like do not use these, right? Client participation information, financial information, passwords, different types of keys, medical health information. So if your organization doesn't touch a lot of that data, you're probably good, but like it's also important to be aware of like even particular staff information you would not want public. So it's important to keep those out. So the world's smallest quiz is coming up, and see, I've already answered it. So if you go back to Slido, there will be a quiz, and I believe you'll enter, I think this first question maybe is enter your name and then answer the quiz, but we'll see it. All right. Maybe I made a mistake. Let's see. All right, we see everybody. We see everybody. There it is. Okay. See, technology, even for a technologist, challenge. All right. After you enter your name, you'll answer the question: which type of data is appropriate to be using in Gen AI? This is like also perhaps a group quiz. There's no need to make this more challenging than it is. All right, public domain, personal medical records, classified government documents, confidential business plans, and folks entering. All right, we will get to see some of those results. All right, wonderful, everybody pass. Cool. All right, second question. Which type of data is considered inappropriate for Gen AI use? So confidential legal documents, publicly available data sets, published academic papers, open access journals and resources. Some folks entering. These are like the world's easiest quizzes, so no stress. All right, so we will, all right, got a good quorum. Wonderful. These tools are not, there's a lot of very specific kind of like assistant lawyer aspects of Gen AI tools to help with drafting and contracts. I would still be incredibly cautious about taking those at face value and inputting them and leveraging them in your workflows. It's the one aspect I think that has a lot of growth. But they're also like they're lawyers who have trained for good reason. Definitely consider bringing on legal support for particular tasks that involve that. All right, awesome. Thank you. Well, everybody got 100. Not just a shout out, Michelle, but good job, Michelle. But good job to all of us. All right, so we're gonna touch a little bit on bias. And so this is another really good highlight of example of why it's really important to review your outputs for inclusivity before hitting send, before sharing. These AI models are trained on the internet and they 100% reflect human biases and prejudices. These two images were images that I actually made for a slide deck a number of months ago. And the first image did not have a lot of context to it. It was not a good prompt. And so it gave me what it thought was the proper response. And then the second image was one where I had to actually say the word diverse in order to get a diverse group of people sitting at a table playing cards. One would think that inherently maybe they would show that on the first look, right? Um, the first generation, but you really have to, constantly iterate to get not only text, but visuals that are representative of the people that you're communicating with and trying to describe. And so this is really relevant in terms of creating visuals for social media, email communications. It's super, super important to not just take the first thing that's created because it may not represent your organization, the people that you serve, and the message that you're trying to provide. And I was very disappointed by this when it happened, but really glad to have gotten another very more interesting, diverse, inclusive representation. All right, so we're talking about a little bit the implications of Gen AI in the environment, which is, we cannot discuss this entire topic without mentioning this. All right, so a lot of this software is kind of like this floating bubble out there, right? It feels weightless. It feels like it doesn't have impact when you type a prompt into your web browser, to a desktop app, or to your mobile phone if you have it. Like it feels like something instantly appears and it's great. There's no like harm potentially being done. But Gen AI is incredibly resource intensive. It's physical infrastructure in data centers that are just on a very massive scale. To kind of put into perspective, right, got 1.2 million pounds of CO2 that was just generated to train the first iteration of OpenAI's model. That was just to train it. That does not include the constant use that has been going on for years and years and years. 1.2 million pounds of carbon is equal to driving your gas-powered car from New York to San Francisco, back and forth 220 times. Now, when you magnify that to see somebody entering maybe a prompt that maybe they could have used Google search for and not a full Gen AI response, you start to understand like what is the ongoing cost and what is the potential footprint of how we're interacting with these systems, what they're providing for us, and is it at a cost to our environment? So another aspect I think that is a hardware based, right, and not necessarily like the physicality aspects of that. These Gen AI tools and these servers and these data centers, these are using highly specialized equipment that have to get replaced very frequently. And there is an enormous projection of e-waste. That is chips that end up in landfills. And maybe they contain, right, rare earth metals. They're difficult to recycle. There's both the aspect of the data centers and the water that they're using. And then when those servers and those chips are done, they end up someplace. And it's just a really interesting like juxtaposition of, are we able to move faster? Are we able to be more efficient in our work, but at what cost, and what can we all do about it? And so on the flip side, maybe there could be some aspects where AI's potential to help solve some of these climate solutions that it's probably causing in itself. There's a lot of really interesting discovery going on in terms of like modeling and biotechnology and material science to figure out how to provide like the right types of resources to help optimize these data centers. Grid optimization as well. There's a massive amount of energy. Precision farming, they clear lots of land, but how do we kind of optimize like that wastewater and different practices? And so there's so much like potential as well as harm, and having those two exist at the same time can be really, really challenging. And a really a point of conflict that I know a lot of folks in the sector kind of combat, trying to figure that out. So we're almost there. Module 3 recap. So got to identify a couple of data types that shouldn't be shared or could be shared with AI tools. We just touched on a little bit of Gen AI and the environment. Little note on potential biases and how to sort of combat that, and making sure that you are not taking that first output from a system. how to advocate for an AI policy or guidelines. Naming things are super important. If the word policy is going to scare people, name it something else. Name it a playbook. Name it a guideline. Name it an AI use. Something more friendly or palatable. But yeah, how to advocate for one. If you don't have one yet, everyone will probably eventually will need one written that is customized. And so I have just this one quote that I pulled. I have on my to-do list to watch this entire event that just recently happened with Pope Leo. And so I really love this quote. I think it's like the real crux of a lot of the work that we all do, how we leverage technology, how we hope to maybe leverage Gen AI that is incredibly aligned with our values and why we do the work that we do. Because technology ultimately does have the power to heal, connect, educate, and protect our common home. But it can also divide, exclude, and generate new forms of injustice. The technology that we use across the board is never neutral and takes on the characteristics of those who devise, finance, regulate, and use it. So it could also, I wish I had another quote here, but I also go back to the Spider-Man's uncle's quote, "Great power comes great responsibility." It has never been more important than it is now to understand what these tools do, what they can do for you, and how you can ethically and responsibly use them to do your work in a way that aligns with how you are as a human, where your values sit. And yeah, so that's kind of it for me. Thank you all. You guys have been so fantastic and participatory, and all of the tech and the browsers and the apps and stuff. I hope you all like took away some really great notes on this and opened your eyes. Maybe there's some new tools you might try. I've got a little QR code. The URL is at the bottom if that's easier for folks. I've got a page on my website, just more AI resources that are friendly. I tend to update that about once a month with new things. But yeah, thank you. Thank you to Greater Hartford Gives, Mayor, Monica, have been so lovely in helping to prep for this workshop. And I'm so appreciative of everybody's time. Like 2 hours on a Thursday, it's hot and we're all talking about AI. Like, I really, really appreciate it. Yeah, I'm
Thank
here
you,
for
Jasmine, so
questions.
much. Yes, thank you so much to Jasmine for guiding us through this very complex topic and trying to demystify it. And Jasmine is staying on for a little bit to answer additional questions. And Jasmine, maybe for starters, there have been a few questions in the chat that I can share with you.
Yes.
One is from Kristen, which is any recommendations for solutions for capturing in-person conversations, but still want meeting notes?
Very good question. It's something that I'm actually wrestling with myself. There's a tool I've been looking at. There's a number of different ones, right? It attaches to your phone. It's called Pocket. Now everybody will start getting ads on all of the devices now that I'm saying it. A little device sits there, is kind of always listening. I would be really cautious though, because Connecticut is like a two-party, I think, agreement state on that. But I do understand like there are opportunities where you're not on a Zoom or a Google Meet where you do want to have that. But yeah, I'm personally still doing research. I'm also trying to be more present and trying to not be so technical all the time, but there are some really interesting devices. But yeah, Pocket is one of those that are out there.
Great, thanks, Jasmine. And then Lori is asking, if we want to analyze our donor database, could someone go into the program and ask it to locate donors to my organization?
Like, I wonder if is it your own database that you're wanting to query?
Yes, it would be, the organization's data. I'm just wondering, like, and Gannon kind of answered some of that. It's like, it depends on the program, I guess, and what security you've got. But I was just thinking, anything you put in, can it be publicly pulled back out?
I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to reference a very recently public incident that happened database related, where somebody was agentically developing and executing code on a database, and it completely there were safeguards in place, but it was very easy to get around them. It completely wiped out their production database. And so I tried to say that to not scare you, but I do have some particulars when it comes to inserting yourself in certain moments of related to database operations. I think there's some real value in being able to verify what that query is doing, have an understanding of if there are particular views or replicas available, because that story scared me. And so I would hate for anybody to completely wipe out databases. Hopefully that's not scary, but helpful.
Great, thanks, Jasmine. And then Kara has a question. Do you think staff should be trained first before being allowed to use AI?
It's like a chicken egg thing. I think I think I think in a year, I think there'll be more stringent like learning development, like a yearly, here's an AI, course. I think if an organization is small, I think it's worthwhile to let people experiment, but experiment with on an enterprise account that has some guidelines and restrictions in place for like data privacy sensitivity aspects. So I would also say, like, yeah, if you're trying to write your AI policy and it's taking forever and it's also stifling people from even learning, it's kind of challenging to then have their learnings be fed back into the policy. So it's kind of like I would let people experiment with guardrails and then use that knowledge to then like build and then do more formalized training, because people are also just figuring out like what is the right type of task for the right tool for the right right use cases. So there's like the training and the policy and like the actual tool provisioning. Like they, if it's possible, I would almost do all of that in parallel in a way, if it's possible.
Yeah, thanks. And then Jasmine, Lori is asking, is there a sample organizational policy for AI? We're updating our employee handbook, and maybe a partial response is what Micah entered, which is N10 has some resources specifically for nonprofits on AI policies and frameworks. And Micah very nicely entered the link, but I don't know if you have anything else you'd like to add, Jasmine.
Yes. So this is like I have another workshop topic that I do on AI, value-driven AI policy development. I have a resource for almost like a Mad Lib style AI policy template. I'm happy to share that. That could be part of the resources that go out. So in concert with that, like the resources that I have are quite different than out there, because mine take a stance of starting with and naming your values, your hard lines, and your boundaries first as you start crafting them. So it will look a little different than I think than other avenues, but I think it's important to see what else is out there and see what other peer organizations are doing to get a sense of what you need customized. So yeah, I'm happy to share. Micah, thank you for sharing that Intense resource as well. Big fans of them. Yeah.
And then just a quick note too, I also added an additional resource after that from the Council on Criminal Justice. They have an AI user decision framework that I think is incredibly thorough. It would require you to adapt it to your own context and organization, but it covers a lot of ground and considerations to make.
Thank you.
Right. And just one more from the chat, and then I know we have a couple of hands raised. Betsy is asking, we have a Google Workspace account, and I've been very worried about the level of access Google has to my organization's files if we use Gemini. And in parentheses are Gmails, strategy, notes on conversations with fellow advocates, policymakers, donors, and donor and staff, PII. I've turned off staff access to it. Am I being paranoid, or is this the right step?
Clarifying, turn off access to Gemini entirely?
Yes, I did. Well, I think I did.
Yeah. Is there an alternative AI tool that is being used in place of that, or?
Yeah, so we have a policy. We've been very clear with folks. They are allowed to use any AI tool except Gemini to write first drafts, to do an initial analysis of publicly available information, to use it to do some like refining edits to language to make something more clear or concise. I'm just very concerned about the depth of information and the breadth of information that we have in Google Drive, and I'm very wary of someone or something getting access to it.
Um, so what can I say? I think so. This is also in the camp of like there's a access to many different tools in the tool sprawl. I think turning off Gemini, if you feel like it's going to be, a detriment, is totally fine. Like I've seen organizations where they have certain access to certain outside software systems turned off, turned on. I've seen organizations where they have their own specific connectors built and things that I've helped them build and harden, specifically for Google Workspace, that is going to help them align more with their AI policy. So I think like I would Gemini turned off, not worried. I'm also then going to ask you a question of then um, what if you're using like Claude, do people still have access to writing and drafting emails? Because you got to hit kind of all ends of access at that point too, even if Gemini is off as well. Something to consider.
Thank
That's
you.
helpful.
Looks like Maggie and Adriana have their hands raised. So Maggie, do you want to ask your question?
Yes. Thank you, Miss Jasmine, for a wonderful session. I am from Gardener's House, and we go old school. We help families who are affected by cancer with basic needs, and one of the area that I am concerned about is collecting data. So that's why I said we go old school. Everything I write everything by hand and collect information. If I when I have to switch or to introduce AI with collecting data, um, where do you suggest that we start? Because one of the things to why I do it old school is that while you're writing, you have to pay attention to the person who comes to you in that state of devastation. So at the same time, you don't want to collect all the information that they're giving you. So I only write certain things down. If I have to use AI, where do I start? What suggestion would you give?
Mm. That's that I feel like my response should be meaty because that's a very meaty question. Um, so I think like what you're doing so far like makes a lot of sense in terms of like I assume then you're not using like a meeting transcription service, like you are writing notes by hand and going through that manually. Do you do any type of like digitization of those notes when you do need to kind of transfer them over? Oh, I think you're muted still.
No, I write and I have them just like you go to a doctor's office and you have all the files and the folders and I have all the notes. Um I haven't really put them on a computer. As I said, we have everything old school. And that is my concern that their information getting out there or in the hands of folks. That's why if I have to give information, I have to make sure that I give out information, let's say to a doctor's office, so without violating the privacy. So I just wanted to get from you, to get to the AI stage, where do I start without having to worry about the person information is out there? Because I
Yeah.
have the information, but it's all locked down,
Yeah.
physically.
No, yeah, no, I love that.
Physically.
I would say like I'm gonna harp back to like my original rallying cry. Like I would get a definitely a paid account. Like if you I'm gonna just recommend Claude. I would get a paid account. Don't use free. Free automatically means like you are what you're providing. And so I'd recommend like starting there, and then they have like account executive folks that you can reach out to that can best help set up also your enterprise kind of agreements. But definitely like I would first step like paid account and then going through a lot of those settings and making sure that like you may turn off access to having the AI like generate an email or generate access or clamp its access down to wider parts of the internet. But yeah, if you're wanting to start, yeah, start with a paid account for sure. But yeah, no, thanks for your question. That's a sensitive set of information and data, and so I definitely understand
Thank
your hesitation.
thank you.
Oh, Mary.
Any other questions? Feel free to unmute and ask your question or enter it in the chat.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I am not really the best person for AI. I took this opportunity to learn a little bit about it. I've been experimenting on my own, you know, doing things, but I do want to have a question because I hear things about removing Gemini from the office access, which I know some people in my office obviously are really good with the AI. How long does information retains in there? In what kind of information, just so I know I can maybe put some restraining into what access people will have with AI, because I was really not even thinking about this until I just hear this.
Yeah.
Any suggestions?
Yeah, I would suggest if you are the admin on the Google Workspace or you have connections with, that's where those settings are going to be in terms of like that data retention for Gemini. Yeah, that's I think a good reminder for us all to kind of check in because I think it will also access like there's Gemini in the Chrome browser. There's Gemini
Mhm.
on writing kind of sidecar to a bunch of the different
Mhm.
Google products and suites. So yeah, definitely a
Copilot,
setting.
something like that. Okay. Mhm.
Yeah, there should be a setting on data retention. And if not, email them, ask.
Okay.
Yeah,
So I'm gonna
absolutely.
talk to my IT
Yeah,
to
they would
actually
give you
think.
really good
Okay.
resources for that. Yeah,
All right. Thank you.
no problem.
Any other questions for Jasmine?
Hey, this is Marcus. Just circling back. So for a little bit more context, I use Claude for my personal side, and I love Claude. But because we are at work already deeply integrated into the Microsoft ecosystem, we use OneDrive and OneNote and Outlook. It just seemed like I guess, best point of entry for using AI with work, just because, again, of also the cybersecurity, right? And just being able to contain everything within that ecosystem. Um, but I have seen firsthand between like the quality that I'm getting from the stuff I'm using Claude for on the personal side versus Copilot, that the Claude stuff is slightly better, especially being a small um, I do community work, which is what I'm using it for, which is not totally far off from the small nonprofit work that we do for business. And so the stuff I'm outputting on both sides is similar, even though very separate. And so, yeah, I'm just kind of struggling with needing to bring all our information into a whole new system versus just keeping it where it is.
Yeah, that's a good question. And um, what I'm like honestly seeing right now is
Mhm.
just like there people are having multiple for even like a redundancy standpoint. A lot of these tools, they have outages very frequently. And so even having like more than like if your maybe Copilot is primary and maybe Claude is your secondary. And I think that is from a a risk management process, like more challenging, right? You're managing more tools, more managed settings, but also to ensure that building up wholesale complete workflows and systems in one and don't have a fallback in another. Claude, and I think there will also be a time where kind of like playing a little bit of race of like which tool's better at this, which tool's better at that. They're all close, right? And I do think like there's more differentiation to come. But yeah, I would honestly probably recommend both, like dual, because I have a Slack channel where I have like incident updates for all of the tools I use. It's constant. You got to go back and forth. You have to make sure, and then sometimes like you get really comfortable. You build up you have a lot of memory of all of your preferences in Claude. Like I would recommend just like promoting one as like the primary for like the the work related stuff, and then always having a backup.
Sure.
For sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Jasmine? Going once, going twice, anything else? Okay, great. Well, thank you everybody so much for being here with us and hanging out for the Q&A. And of course, all this has been recorded, so everyone will get a copy of that. And look forward to seeing you at the next NSP workshop. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Bye. Okay.
Great job, Jasmine. I really think it was such a great session, so interesting. You covered a heck of a lot of ground. I was like, oh, is she going to be able to get through it all? And you did.
I was watching that. That's the danger about like an open discussion. You're like, time, but no, it was, no, I think it went well. It was, I think it's gotta be both sides of it. It can't just be like one way delivery of information. People have really good insights and questions that others are afraid to ask, are going to learn from other folks. And so I really enjoyed it was so much fun. Thank you so much, you both.
Oh, thank you. And you know what, Monica and I were behind the scenes chatting with each other. I think what we'll do is Monica will also